Hello and welcome to another episode of the Expanse Abridged, where we're doing Leviathan Wakes, which is the first book in the series, and today we're on chapter 4, which is a Miller chapter. To my loyal listeners, all zero of you who watched the last video, I apologise for this one being slightly delayed. I've had some exams and I've been busy with work, so I haven't had a chance. And I know all of you who watched that video, which is myself, are really upset about that, but I promise to do better going forward. So to get straight into today's episode, as I said, we're with Miller, and it opens with Miller eating some food in his hole, which is always a great way of Expanse describing an apartment, calling it a hole. And he gets a message from the Blue Frog, which is not like a Russian sleeper agent, but instead it's a bar. And it's apparently a near exact replica of a famous Earth bar in Mumbai, only with licensed prostitutes and legal drugs. And Miller is eating his fungal beans and vat-grown rice, because it's the Expanse, and we love a reference to fungus and mushrooms. And so he sat there, and then the Blue Frog rings him, and the bar owner Hassini is the guy there. And Miller done him a favour when Hassini took on unlicensed prostitutes a while ago, and since then they traded her favours, which is the unofficial grey economics of civilization. And Hassini's like, yo, there's banger music banging, and I can see your partner's here, he's having a bad night, should I keep serving him? Miller's like, what's up? And Hassini's like, he doesn't want a reason to be happy, he wants a reason to get unhappy. Miller's like, shit on this. I better go find my boy, Dmitry Havelock. And he throws away his mushrooms into the recycling bin, because again, it's the Expanse, and we love a reference to some good old-fashioned recycling that seems to work perfectly every time. And it's too warm in the Blue Frog, so Miller says, I won't take a jacket, but he pops his pistol in his boot. And he pops out, and it says, we talk a bit about how, because obviously they're an asteroid, they're on the ground, that there's daytime and nighttime are indistinguishable. It's all about your own shifts. And Miller starts, he was going to get a taxi or like a cab, but that would mean arriving as a cop, and this is the kind of problem that doesn't want him to be a police when he arrives. He needs to be a normal person, and it's deep-seated supposition of arriving like a cop. So he gets a tube, and we have this weird anecdote. I don't entirely understand it. I think it's just to make Miller seem more miserable, but he's sat opposite like a family, a dad and a kid, and we just a description of the kid who's only 2.5, but her limbs are long and thin, and her flesh is all pink because belters have to have loads of cocktails to deal with like their muscles aging really weirdly. So it's just one of those. So the kid's like all pink compared to like an Earth kid, but you can see the limbs are really long because their limbs grow quicker in 0G. And Miller says like, how old's the kid? Father's like 2.5, and then says, I've got a divorce that's about that old. Which, again, just weird Miller chat. I don't think it mentioned it, but I like to think he's got his little pork pie hat on at this point as well. Then we get some description of the tube. Smells like oil and ozone. And Miller can see his wife staring at him as well the entire time, which is fun. His ex-wife. And he's just looking at the adverts, and he's realising he's going into a problem. So Miller says he lets the bright and empty colours dance and ignore their content. Mentally, he was holding up his problem, turning it one way and then the other, not even looking for an answer, which is quite fun, of just visually rotating a small version of your best mate in your head as you think about him, which is quite a fun thing to do. Then we get a description of Haylock's in a bar. Haylock was an earther, he's in a portside bar, he must be looking for a fight. And after spinning around a little version of his partner in his head, he felt centred. We finally arrive at the bar. It's described as barn heat of bodies with fake air pollution, designed to simulate Mumbai. And Hassini, who's the bar owner, was stood in a group of steroid-enhanced bouncers and underdressed serving girls. Gets Miller's attention, nods his water back, and Miller doesn't do anything. Miller says it's a port bar, so it's volatile. Doesn't want to get into a fight. He says when he had to choose, he'd run into belters before inner planets and women before men. His face was a constant mild apology. And then we get there, he finds Havelock. Havelock turns to him, ready to start a fight. Flares, looks at him, is surprised, and then something like a sullen shame takes over his face, and he asks what Miller's doing here. Miller says he's here to pick a fight. And then he realises that the bar is normally for belters, pretty much. So normally not more than 1 in 10 was an earther, but today it's more like a third of short, stocky people because there's a ship come in. Which is why there's probably going to be a fight, because there's more of a mix. Miller asks if it's the EMCN, which is the Earth-Mars Coalition Navy. So that's Earth and Mars like running the Navy to just oppress belters and like attack pirates and stuff. But Miller doesn't know if it is, because he hasn't been looking at the relative position of the planets, which is quite an interesting one where you think That would indicate like when the ships, if Earth and Mars on the wrong side of the sun. I know it's quite a cool one. They don't really explore it too much. They do sometimes, depending on like, because transit times are different. But it's quite interesting when you think of like, if there are in a universe, you need to actually know where planets are for any like naval operations or even war. But these security people are from Protogen, which is obviously gets really important later on in the book. These security people. So it's like a little teaser, which I only realised reading it again right now. That's me. We keep going. Miller gets a free drink from the bar, and it's soda water, which is quite fun. It's a cheap bar. And the Miller says to Havelock, no matter how many of their asses, i.e. the Earthers, you kick, Shadid, as in the captain of the police station they work at, isn't going to like you. Havelock lurches to his feet, heads for the door. Because he's an Earther and he's trying to stomp out, he starts floating, and he looks like he's hopping about everywhere, which is quite funny. And they go into the corridor outside, which smells of grime and grease and air scrubbers and stuff. And Havelock's saying he's not drunk. And he's saying, Miller, you're not my nanny. And Miller's like, yeah, both true. And they just keep wandering about past brothels and shooting galleries, coffee bars and poetry clubs. And everything, the air smells of piss and old food, which is quite a fun description. I mean, I don't know, I like stuff like that, the way it really just seemed like port, dockside, like a transit area that's kind of grimy but full of character. And another reference to brothels, which is a weird one in The Expanse. It comes up quite a lot. It's interesting when you think about what they're trying to say about like modern spacefaring society goes really liberal. Are they like sex positive, or is it actually quite bad because they don't really talk a lot about. They talk a good amount about male prostitutes, to be fair. So it's kind of weirdly based. But then Havelock starts talking about his experience. He's saying he did 3 years in Terrytown, which is a great name for a place. And then he keeps walking about. He does all this experience, and he's a good cop. And he keeps telling Miller, "I'm a good cop. I'm damn good." And it's like, why am I being treated like shit? And Miller says, people look at you, they don't see Havelock, they see an Earther. And Havelock's like, I just don't get it. Earth, Mars. I'm not a Martian. And Miller's like, they all look the same if they're not Delta. And it's like, Earth hates Mars for having a better fleet. Mars hates Earth for having a bigger one. Maybe soccer's better in 4G. Maybe it's worse. I don't know. I'm just saying, this far from the sun, you can cover Earth and Mars with one thumb. Which rhymes, which means it's obviously good. Like Dr. Zeus said, if it rhymes, it is good. It's basically the idea there that Havelock, he doesn't really understand that PP is going to get treated differently, even if he sets in. He says, when I took the contract, I knew I'd have to work to fit in. I thought you'd get your chops busted for a while, and then you're on the team. It's not like that here. And Miller's like, it's not. And this difference, this ethnic thing, is just so important when you're this far out. And it's interesting. So as they're talking about it, some people go past with the OPA split circle on their shoulder, and Miller's tenses up and is about to reach for his gun, but they don't see him, luckily. That constant undercurrent. Then they realise they're out in the corridor with some booze. Miller's got soda water, but they're out drinking. They're like, right, let's go to a different bar. And instead of trying to pick fights, and they go to the Distinguished Hyacinth, which is a great name. Sounds like a good band name as well. And that's a cop bar, so it's all part of cop people. And Miller's like, it's better to keep the breakdown in the family if he's going anywhere, which is an interesting way of saying it. Of like the police losing it, it's better to keep it in the family. And they head up there. It's like an old style belter bar, designed if the gravity's going to turn off any minute. So it's like, and then all old. It's like first generation air recycling is what they describe the plants as. So it must be like the air's not that clean. So it's devil's ivy and snake plant. And music loud enough to keep, so you can talk over it, but kept conversations private. And Miller adopts bluff masculinity as he goes in, which again is classic Miller, because just completely misreading how everyone looks at him. And again, I really want him to have his stupid little pork pie hat on. And then Havelock starts saying, why are you on that super secret investigation and I'm not? The lowly Earther isn't supposed to know. Miller saying it's bullshit. And says it's about a kidnap case, effectively, but the kid's not a minor. And then Havelock starts asking about it, and Miller's like, shit, tables been turned. It's not kidnap on a teenager, because obviously at this point Julie is actually an adult, so it is a kidnap job. And Havelock's like, yeah, she could just stay out there if she wanted to. This isn't law enforcement, it's not even station security, it's just dysfunctional families playing power games, which is a great way to start thinking about it when you realise Miller and Havelock are just these tiny pieces in these great games that are going to start moving. They get a beer, and it's apparently a light and rich because of the fermentation and yeast. So again, more reference to the food out there. And then as they're like chatting about life, a guy from Homicides come over and starts talking about work. So by the end of the night, Havelock was laughing and trading jokes along the rest of them. If there was occasionally a narrowed glance or subtle dig, he took it in stride. Which is like the best part about Havelock. You see him in like later books and stuff. He does go with the flow, which is always nice, even when people are like chushing him for his background, which isn't even being Russian. I don't think that's ever really brought up. And then all of a sudden, Miller's phone chimes, as well as 50 others throughout the bar, and Captain Shadid is on the broadcast screen, who looks tired. But ladies and gents, stop what you're doing. We've got emergency orders. 10 minutes ago, an unencrypted signed message came from the rough direction of Saturn. We haven't confirmed it's true, but it looks it. She's put a hold on it, but some asshole's going to get it on the network, and then after that, it hit the civilian networks in 5 minutes, and there's going to be like mayhem basically. And so he cuts the broadcast and starts playing this message that's come out from the distance. It says he was an orange vacuum suit with the helmet off, an earther, maybe in his early 30s, pale skin, blue eyes, dark short cropped hair. Even before he opened his eyes, Miller saw the signs of shock and rage in his eyes, and the way he held his head forward. My name, the man said, is James Holden. Whoa. Big man Jim is getting in the game. Yeah, that's that episode. Nice little one. You get to understand a bit more about the dynamics between Miller and Havelock, and it's quite cute how they look after each other. Because even though Miller is a loner, and he kind of likes to think he's a loner, he does also go out of his way to look after his mates sometimes, which is an interesting dynamic, I always think. And then we also were introduced to this broadcast, which will really set the game in motion. So yeah, cheers up, boys. I'll make sure I'm more regular going forward.